You probably never imagined yourself here, trying to accept the end of something that once meant so much. It feels painful and confusing, like losing a part of yourself. But learning how to accept a breakup without losing who you are is the first step toward feeling better and regaining control of your emotional life. Endings, especially of relationships, confront us with a stark reality. Our lives can change without our consent. A breakup doesn't merely represent a separation from another person. It exposes a deeper absence within, the emptiness once occupied by expectations, hopes, and dreams, now suddenly vanished. This emptiness often feels unbearable, yet it's precisely where genuine transformation begins. When a relationship ends, you're not just grieving the loss of someone else. You're grieving the dissolution of an identity constructed around that person. The discomfort you feel is the shadow side of attachment, revealing how deeply your sense of self has intertwined with another. Facing this truth is challenging. It requires confronting your own illusions about what love is and about who you believed you were within that love. This discomfort isn't merely an obstacle. It's a guide pointing toward deeper self-awareness. It's natural to attempt to avoid the pain, to distract yourself, or cling desperately to memories of better times. Yet these efforts only prolong the anguish, binding you further to an illusion that no longer exists. True acceptance involves acknowledging discomfort, not as something to fear, but as evidence of your own humanity, a sign you're bravely engaging with reality. Human psychology is intricate. We tend to hold tightly to familiar emotional patterns, even those that no longer serve us. Perhaps you find yourself replaying memories, projecting an idealized version of your partner onto the past, or imagining scenarios that never existed. These mental projections, though comforting, obscure the reality of the breakup. They trap you in a cycle of longing and regret, preventing genuine healing from beginning. To accept the end without losing yourself means confronting these internal projections and illusions. It means recognizing that your attachment may have been rooted in deeper fears or unresolved wounds, perhaps fears of loneliness, abandonment, or inadequacy. By looking inward honestly and compassionately, you uncover the psychological patterns driving your attachment. This awareness, though uncomfortable, becomes the foundation for lasting emotional transformation. Consider that every rupture in life, though painful, also creates a space for profound growth. Relationships often reflect our innermost struggles back to us. The end of a relationship isn't just about losing someone else. It's about gaining clarity on who you are, apart from another's validation. It invites you to explore the uncomfortable question of why this loss feels so threatening to your sense of identity. Who are you when no one else defines your worth? Embracing the reality of a breakup demands courage, the courage to face uncertainty, solitude, and vulnerability. But solitude doesn't have to mean isolation. Rather, it can become a space where your true self emerges clearly. In solitude, illusions fade, and you begin seeing yourself without distortion or projection. What once felt like emptiness now becomes openness, room for self-discovery and emotional renewal. The end of your relationship isn't just something you must endure. It's a profound opportunity for transformation. You haven't lost who you are. Rather, you're being invited into a deeper understanding of yourself. Accepting the breakup is less about letting go of someone else and more about reclaiming the parts of yourself that you've forgotten or neglected. As you begin this journey inward, remember, your emotional pain isn't evidence of weakness. It is proof that you have loved deeply, authentically, and bravely. The willingness to face this pain, to accept endings without abandoning yourself, is what opens the door to genuine emotional freedom. Accepting a breakup begins with clarity, but clarity demands that you stop romanticizing what could have been. It's human to dream, to idealize love, to imagine perfect endings. But this romanticized vision can become a subtle trap, keeping you emotionally attached long after the relationship ends. Romanticizing isn't about remembering genuine moments of happiness. It's about rewriting history, seeing your relationship through a distorted lens that amplifies the good while erasing the painful realities. Your mind becomes an artist, creating a masterpiece of illusions, one that seems comforting but ultimately prolongs your emotional anguish. Every time you replay a scenario where things worked out differently, you're not merely revisiting memories, you're constructing an alternate reality. It's a tempting escape from pain. Yet, escaping into fantasy doesn't heal wounds, it deepens them. Instead of grieving what truly ended, you mourn something that never existed, holding on to shadows rather than facing reality. But why do we romanticize lost love so strongly? At the core lies a simple yet powerful emotion: fear. Fear of being alone, fear of uncertainty, fear that real love might never happen again. Romanticizing provides false reassurance, convincing you that perfection was nearly within your grasp. It tells you that happiness was just one choice, one event, one moment away. This illusion keeps your heart anchored to a story that's impossible to fulfill. Breaking free from romanticizing requires courage. Courage to see clearly, courage to face uncomfortable truths. Start by consciously separating memory from fantasy. Remember clearly not just the warm moments, but also the tensions, misunderstandings, and disappointments. Seeing both sides of reality doesn't diminish the relationship's importance, it honors its truth. Consider this carefully. The relationship you imagine, the perfect version in your mind, isn't real. The idealized partner you've built mentally is not the person who left. The future you envisioned was always just one possibility, not a promise. Recognizing this reality brings you closer to genuine emotional freedom. It gives you permission to grieve authentically and fully, releasing attachment to an ideal that was never truly yours. Often, the pain you feel isn't solely from the breakup itself, but from losing the dream you carefully built around someone. It hurts to admit that dreams sometimes remain unfulfilled. Yet facing that truth liberates you from emotional captivity. You realize clearly that happiness doesn't rely on one specific outcome. Love can still exist in different forms, at different times, without needing to match the script you imagined. Letting go of romanticized visions doesn't mean losing hope. Rather, it redirects hope toward healthier, more authentic connections. When you accept reality clearly, you're free to build future relationships based on truth rather than illusion, intimacy rather than fantasy. Emotional health thrives in truth. It suffers in projection. Your power lies not in clinging desperately to what could have been, but in acknowledging what truly was and what genuinely could be. The idealized story you're holding on to may feel comforting, but it keeps you from seeing new opportunities clearly. Authentic love demands authentic vision, clear enough to recognize reality without needing to rewrite it. As you release the habit of romanticizing, you reclaim emotional clarity. Illusions fade, reality sharpens, and slowly, you begin to heal, not by denying your past love, but by accepting the true story of what occurred, allowing space for genuine emotional growth to unfold. Letting go of romanticized memories opens the door to another necessary realization. Breaking the cycle of emotional dependency is crucial for emotional freedom. Dependency isn't just longing or sadness. It's a subtle addiction to someone else's validation, a reliance on external approval to feel emotionally stable. Emotional dependency disguises itself cleverly, often as intense passion or commitment. You might think it was genuine love that kept you tied closely, yet deep down, something felt anxious and restless. Dependency whispers a convincing lie. You're only complete when someone else chooses you. This belief, hidden within layers of affection, quietly shapes how you see yourself and others, binding you to emotional cycles that are difficult to break. Dependency often arises from a deeper place, rooted in early experiences. Perhaps you learned early in life that your worth depended on pleasing others or meeting their expectations. Your emotional stability became tied to external reactions. Approval brought happiness, disapproval brought anxiety. Without realizing it, your romantic relationships continued this pattern, reinforcing an unconscious belief that someone else's affection defined your emotional safety. When relationships end, emotional dependency magnifies your pain. The breakup feels not just like loss, but like abandonment, as if part of your very identity has been torn away. The emptiness you experience isn't simply missing another person. It's the absence of external validation that once stabilized you emotionally. The quiet discomfort you feel isn't something to fear. It's a signal pointing toward a deeper issue that demands your attention. Breaking free from this cycle requires courage. Courage to confront yourself without the comfort of someone else's approval. Begin by recognizing clearly the patterns within your relationships. Do you consistently sacrifice your emotional needs to maintain closeness? Have you ignored personal boundaries, afraid that asserting yourself might cause someone to leave? These behaviors indicate emotional dependency, not genuine intimacy. Dependency also manifests as fear, a fear that you can't handle life alone or manage your emotions independently. But your ability to cope, to feel secure within yourself, isn't conditional on anyone else. Facing solitude means confronting these fears head-on, uncovering the distorted beliefs that keep you emotionally bound. One powerful method for breaking this dependency cycle is shifting focus inward. Emotional health emerges when validation originates from within, rather than from external relationships. Ask yourself gently, what do I seek from others that I'm not giving to myself? This question might feel uncomfortable, but answering it truthfully uncovers hidden emotional gaps, empowering you to address them directly. Learning self-validation is transformative. It means teaching yourself how to feel safe, accepted, and valuable without relying on another's affirmation. It involves discovering what truly nourishes your emotional well-being, whether through solitude, creative expression, supportive friendships, or meaningful activities. You find strength not in attachment, but in the quiet confidence that you are enough, exactly as you are. When emotional dependency loosens its grip, something profound happens internally. You begin experiencing relationships as complementary rather than essential. Connection becomes joyful rather than anxiety-driven, because your emotional foundation no longer depends on another person's approval. You find freedom in your own presence, realizing your emotional worth isn't defined by someone else's attention or absence. Freeing yourself from emotional dependency reveals another essential truth. Reclaiming your personal power is the key to emotional independence. Personal power isn't about dominance or control. It's about recognizing and believing in your intrinsic worth, independent of any external relationship or validation. The end of a relationship often leaves behind an uncomfortable sense of powerlessness. Perhaps you've felt as if your emotional well-being depended entirely on someone else's choices or feelings. This illusion quietly chips away at your confidence, creating doubt about your own strength. But beneath that uncertainty lies a quiet power waiting to be rediscovered, a power rooted in knowing that you alone determine your emotional value. Reclaiming your personal power begins with acknowledging something important. You are not defined by someone else's actions or choices. Your worth doesn't decrease simply because another person couldn't see it. Relationships end, feelings change, people leave, yet your fundamental value remains untouched by these external events. Rediscovering your strength requires examining the subtle ways you may have handed over your emotional authority. Perhaps you allowed someone else's moods to dictate your own emotional state, or maybe you adjusted your needs constantly to keep the peace. Each time you silenced your truth to maintain connection, you unknowingly gave away part of your personal power. Understanding this helps you regain control, not over another person, but over your own emotions and decisions. You reclaim your power by clearly seeing the beliefs that undermined it. One common belief is that happiness or worthiness depends on another's approval. But approval from others is unpredictable and fleeting. By depending on it, you place your emotional stability in fragile hands. True power comes from within, from knowing clearly and confidently that your self-worth is independent of external validation. Rebuilding personal power also involves taking responsibility for your emotional choices. Responsibility doesn't imply blame. It simply means acknowledging that you have choices, even in difficult situations. You can choose how to respond, how you perceive yourself, and what emotional meaning you assign to the breakup. Responsibility isn't about burdening yourself with guilt. It's about reclaiming the freedom to define your emotional reality. Each decision you make from now on can either reinforce dependence or cultivate emotional empowerment. Small choices, such as prioritizing your own well-being, expressing your boundaries clearly, or honoring your emotional truth, add up significantly. Each conscious choice strengthens your sense of control, diminishing feelings of powerlessness and creating internal resilience. Ultimately, reclaiming personal power means recognizing yourself as the primary authority over your emotional life. You are not defined by how deeply another loved you or how quickly they moved on. Your emotional freedom is entirely within your reach, waiting patiently for you to recognize your own strength and potential. Rediscovering your personal power inevitably brings you face to face with something deeper: the unsettling fear of being alone. This fear is quietly powerful, lurking just beneath the surface, influencing decisions without ever announcing its presence clearly. Yet confronting this fear, facing it bravely and honestly, is essential for emotional freedom. Being alone often feels frightening because it confronts you with your raw self. Without someone else there, you're forced to look inward. No distractions, no comforting illusions, just you and the quiet spaces inside. And sometimes this solitude can feel intensely uncomfortable, but within that discomfort lies profound opportunity. Consider for a moment what loneliness truly reveals. Loneliness isn't just the absence of another person. It's the painful feeling of disconnection from yourself. It emerges when you're not fully at peace with who you are, when solitude seems more like punishment than liberation. This fear of loneliness often disguises itself as an urgent desire for companionship, tempting you to seek temporary relief instead of true self-connection. Yet solitude offers something invaluable: clarity. Without others constantly reflecting who they believe you are, you're free to see yourself authentically, perhaps for the first time. Facing solitude allows you to ask deeper, more meaningful questions. Who are you without someone's validation? What matters to you outside the roles you've played in relationships? Answering these questions honestly isn't easy, but it transforms loneliness from emptiness into openness. What if your fear of being alone is actually a fear of confronting truths you've avoided? Often we cling to relationships not out of genuine love, but because they shield us from having to face our inner shadows. Alone, these shadows appear clearer, demanding your attention. Your anxieties, self-doubts, and hidden insecurities rise quietly, asking to be acknowledged rather than avoided. Acknowledging them is uncomfortable, yet powerfully healing. Solitude invites you into a different kind of relationship, a relationship with yourself. Just as relationships with others demand care, attention, and compassion, your internal world requires the same. It asks gently, Are you willing to be present with your own discomfort? Can you embrace the quiet moments without immediately seeking distraction or validation from elsewhere? Imagine solitude not as isolation but as a mirror. It reflects your true emotional state without judgment, revealing clearly what needs healing and attention. If you notice fear, embrace it gently. If sadness arises, listen carefully. These emotions, though painful, carry wisdom. They reveal where your emotional needs have gone unmet, guiding you toward a deeper connection with yourself. It's common to confuse loneliness with solitude, but they differ profoundly. Loneliness suggests emptiness, an absence of connection. Solitude is purposeful. It's consciously chosen as space for growth, reflection, and renewal. Choosing solitude means you no longer fear being alone. Instead, you recognize clearly that meaningful companionship begins internally, with genuine self-awareness and self-acceptance. This internal shift doesn't eliminate the natural desire for human connection. Rather, it prepares you for relationships built on authenticity rather than fear. When you no longer dread solitude, relationships become choices, not necessities. Connections born from genuine desire, not avoidance, are stronger, healthier, and more fulfilling. Facing the fear of being alone means understanding clearly that your worth isn't conditional on another's presence. It's a quiet revolution within, an emotional shift toward genuine independence. And from that powerful inner space, you begin forming connections based not on fear or insecurity, but on conscious choice and authentic desire. When you face the fear of being alone, something powerful begins to shift inside you. Now, it's time for the most transformative step yet, letting go and moving toward emotional freedom. Letting go isn't just about releasing a person or memory. It's about freeing yourself from emotional chains you didn't realize you carried. Think about letting go as removing a blindfold you've worn too long. Suddenly, colors look brighter, sounds become clearer. Reality comes into sharp focus. But removing that blindfold can feel uncomfortable at first. The world you see clearly may differ from the one you imagined. Yet clarity itself holds immense power. It offers you the opportunity to rebuild your emotional world with honesty, authenticity, and courage. Why is letting go so difficult? Often we mistakenly believe that holding on proves our love or loyalty. We confuse attachment with commitment, clinging with caring. But clinging doesn't honor love, it imprisons it. Genuine love never asks you to sacrifice your emotional freedom. When you hold too tightly to the past, you leave little room for the future. By releasing your grip, you create emotional space for something new, something healthy, something real. Consider your emotional attachments as invisible threads that bind you to old patterns. Each memory or unresolved emotion keeps pulling you backward. Letting go isn't severing connections harshly. It's gently untying knots. It's acknowledging your emotional truth and consciously choosing not to remain stuck. Every knot loosened is a quiet act of courage, a declaration that your future deserves freedom from past pain. Your capacity for emotional freedom grows every time you bravely accept reality. Acceptance doesn't mean you forget or deny what happened. It means clearly recognizing that holding on to past pain only prolongs emotional suffering. Each step toward acceptance moves you closer to genuine emotional independence. It's not immediate, but it's powerful, each small choice accumulating into meaningful change. To truly move forward, you must recognize clearly that emotional freedom doesn't require permission from anyone else. It doesn't depend on your former partner's apology or closure. Closure isn't something granted externally. It emerges within as you slowly release the need for answers or explanations. You gain freedom when you stop waiting for closure, deciding instead to grant it to yourself. You might wonder what emotional freedom truly feels like. Imagine standing in an open field after being confined for too long. Your breath deepens, your shoulders relax. Possibility feels infinite. Emotional freedom isn't merely relief from pain. It's a profound reconnection to your inner strength. It's the quiet certainty that your emotional well-being belongs entirely to you. Letting go challenges you to redefine what emotional strength means. Strength isn't forcing yourself not to feel. It's embracing emotions fully and authentically without becoming trapped by them. Sadness, anger, loss, all these emotions can still arise. But freedom means feeling them without fearing them, knowing clearly that emotions come and go. They no longer control you. You hold the power. Moving toward emotional freedom invites you to see your life clearly, perhaps for the first time. You recognize that endings aren't failures, they're doorways to deeper emotional wisdom. Letting go isn't losing something valuable, it's gaining clarity, authenticity, and inner peace. It's discovering your ability to stand firm emotionally, guided by your truth, no longer bound by past attachments. If this video resonated with you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more content about emotional healing and self-growth. Now I want to hear from you. What was the hardest part of letting go for you? Was it the memories, the fear of being alone, or something else? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them, and your experience might help someone else going through the same process. Thank you for being here. You're not alone in this. See you in the next video.